a massive, massive thank you to all of our amazing channel members whose ongoing support help make these videos possible. Thank you guys so much. It really does mean a lot. Hello, my fellow kin. Welcome back to the channel. I'm joined today by a very, very special guest. I know I say a very special guest every time. They all are special, but Jake in particular is extremely special to me because it's a massive honor and privilege to have him on, being from the channels that inspired me to actually start making content myself, from the Rock and Stone show, especially with Tom and James. So just absolutely just I spent like 5 minutes when we first had the call, gushing, just geeking out over the honor of being in the same call with him. It was crazy. So Jake, massive thank you for wanting to come on today to talk to us about the BRANDFAST detachment. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, man, I'm doing really well. As I said, thank you. Like I said to you before we started this, thank you so much for the kind words and everything. It's amazing to see where obviously the channel's gone from strength to strength. I am still waiting for my beachhead review, even a year later. But instead, I've had to now. Instead, I feel like instead I had to now come on and do something
It's
instead.
exactly that. Yeah, it's the long-term rivalry of you going to events, me missing them. That 1 week I take off. It's
Uh,
finally settled. We've settled the grudge, and you've taken the lead over everybody else.
to be honest, it was the one event I did well at with like considerably noted event that I actually did well at. So it was sad that it was the one time.
It
I
was
was
the
like, yes,
one
I
week I
finally
took
did
off.
it.
It was crazy. The 1 week I took off from, like, yeah, no content this week. It's okay. And then that's the one you go through. And I was explicitly always looking to see if I'd catch you in one, because when I would watch your live streams on Vanguard, one time you mentioned you're like, oh, like one day I'm gonna like try to get like a top placing so I could be featured on the channel. And I was like, oh my god, I gotta catch this guy. And then
Yeah,
I just missed it the one time it happened.
yeah. After that, it just never happened really.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah. So funny,
but
so funny. It's okay. You
yeah,
still
don't
have your
worry.
Grey Knights career that we could look after.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. My budding Grey Knights career, which from about 4 years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, everybody, we're going to jump into Brand Fast today. I received a number of changes over the weekend. And when you're going to be watching this, my tactical report will already have been out, where I kind of played a little game with Brandfast, talk about like my thoughts and how the detachment plays. I want to get some hands-on experience for this video, connecting with Jake today. So we're going to kind of just walk you guys through this, talk about the detachments, some of the enhancements, the stratagems, look at the overall kind of like macro strategy of what the detachment wants to really do. Talk about some combos, and then we're each going to share a list with you at the end of the video that we think is going to be a good way to kind of kickstart your foray into this detachment. So
Yeah.
basically, BRANDFAST OATHBAND, the detachment ability is pretty simple. Infantry that are wholly within 6 inches of a transport get sustained hits 1 in shooting. So you don't have to actually disembark to get this. You just have to be wholly within 6 inches of a transport. And the play style that this detachment offers is really one, I think, about kind of like primary control and denial. And there is still, I think, a big emphasis on board control, despite some of the changes the stratagem received, which we'll talk about, of course, a bit later in the video. So, Jake, what are your kind of initial thoughts about like Brandfast and like the kind of play style and macro strategy the army wants to have?
Yeah, I definitely feel it's a good detachment. Like when I remember first reading the book, I thought, this one really jumped out at me on the page. Not just because of the obviously aptly named stratagem, which we'll talk about later, but also just because of first off, this is quite a unique transport detachment in 40k. A lot of these normally rely on, like you said, disembarkation, a lot of sort of setup in that regard. Whereas with this, it's simply about board positioning and really understanding sort of your movement ranges and your aura ranges as well. So there is a lot of sort of nice little tactical setups you can do, but because of how vast this sort of array of transport synergies with units, it also actually has a lot of cool areas for little transports like the Capricus Carrier, Sagittars, most notably Land Fortress, in sort of like little key positions in the table to act as like little nest of
Yeah.
Aura's extension as well. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head where you say about the primary control and denial, the board control, and I think like experienced sort of players will really be able to sort of push home these sort of setting up those staging points and making sure that at all times they'll always have that pocket of this aura for the shooting there. And naturally in Votann, it does synergize well with some weapons, most notably on Thunderkin,
Hmm.
with their beams for that crit, which just can go absolutely off on one. But also allows you to have like some units that may not normally hit up as hard, sort of get a bit more emphasis on that as well. So yeah, I think it is a very good detachment, regardless of changes to
Hmm.
stratagems, which we said we'll go on to at some point. But yeah, I think overall it is just on the face of it, you can't argue with, there's barely like any sort of jumping through hoops, as I like to call it. I hate
Yeah.
detachments where it's like if you do A and B, you get C, and
Sometimes.
C is yeah, and C is like not even great.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it's like you don't, like you said, don't have to get out of it, just simply have to be near them, which does obviously create that sort of issue though of them dying and then losing that rule, or having to also, I guess one of the downsides of the detachment is that there's a lot of setup in the list building stage, isn't
Hmm.
there? So you're having to take lots of transports, and if you're taking lots of transports, you're then having to take, if you're taking dedicated transports, you then have to pay the tax of the units that go inside of them. um, or if you're taking land fortresses, which naturally I feel you would, because it is one of the best data sheets in the whole book. That like you're probably taking 1 to 2 of these, maybe even 3,
Hmm.
and then in that instance, that's a lot of points that you've then just spent on these big models, which then you can have to find a way to subsidize the cost of these versus then what you're giving out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
perfectly said. There's a bit more of a decision making process. I think like evaluating, like you need to have a plan, I think, going into list building with this detachment in terms of how you're going to get your auras, how you're going to get your buffs. There's a lot of strategies where there's combos you do, where like setting things up like within 6 inches, like we'll see in just a moment, to get like a benefit or like a threatening access to a stratagem. So I think there is a lot of setup, and list building does become a little bit more finicky, because you got to make sure you have the right balance between vehicles and units that would benefit from those vehicles, especially like Jake said, after you've done setting up and staging how you can make use of some of the stratagems to guarantee you control primary and also are denying primary from your opponent pretty consistently. Okay, so let's talk next about these enhancements here. So the first one is Tactical Alchemy. So this is a Cal model only, takes place in the command phase, and a unit within range of, if this unit is within range of an objective marker you control in no man's land, you could spend a yield point, and on a 4-up, you get a CP back. It's okay. I think you're going to be a little tight on points to have to like fit something like this in, and it's also a little bit, I want to say unreliable, because what are the chances that you're going to consistently have a Cal unit with Hearthguard or maybe Warriors potentially? Like that actually might be interesting. I just thought of that right now. That actually might be something to consider, a Cal model with Warriors consistently like on an objective to do this. Um, Obviously, to mind Hearthguard come into play here, so you'd bring them down. You probably won't be able to deep strike them right on an objective if your opponent screens you out. It's going to be a little bit tough to be there in a command phase if you'll move there in your movement phase. But I could kind of see a world now, just thinking about this out loud. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but you kind of like do the disembark strat, which we'll see in a bit, to get your Cal with Warriors already on the objective, maybe. And then you get the benefit to roll the dice for a CP. You spend the yield points, you stay in hostile a little bit longer, and then on your movement phase, you just get back inside of the transport. I don't know. That could be cool, actually. Maybe something worth considering. But what are your thoughts on this one, Jake?
Yeah, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head where, points are precious in this game. Everybody builds lists differently. I think how I personally build them is I go through the enhancement lists. I look at any super standout ones, which next up there is one in my opinion in this detachment, and then you sort of just build your list. And then if you've got points left over, this is what I would sort of call the sort of plugging the holes sort of
Mm-hmm.
enhancement. The only downside in my mind is that it is a Carl this goes on, and naturally then that just automatically limits you. It means that then you're either not having to take it, you have to take one model to then get this.
Yeah.
But the idea of spending yield points to get CP is interesting. It's a nice concept as well. This is a detachment that potentially would take quite a lot of CP from you as well.
Mm.
But also on top of that, with some of the stratagems we see in this detachment, it does require you being in that sort of lower state of yield points. And this is just a good way to sort of, essentially fob them off, like
Yeah.
just sort of throw them out, just so that you can stay in that sort of,
Yeah.
lower state to then allow your army to do more on the table. But yeah, like it's a cool enhancement. It's only 10 points as well, so it could fit in a lot of lists. But I think versus the things specifically that we're going to talk about later on, I think there's a lot better options than this if you're looking at just not even filling points, but just
Yeah.
wanting to spend your points on things that are going to be a lot more impactful.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think it would have been cool if this could have been taken on something like a Grimnir instead, because then there's actually a real incentive to have him with the warriors. They come out, they're a little bit more durable, and you get the CP too. Why not? Well said.
Yeah.
So, Jake, why don't you take us ahead with the one that you think is probably the best one in this detachment? And I would agree as well.
Yeah, so this is I'm just going to call it the cyber implant, just so then the viewers at home don't have to watch me struggle for probably about 30 minutes saying the first
The
word. So
Trivarg.
this is the victory Varg, yeah. And then I can watch the comments now. This is a very pricey enhancement. This is 30 points, which I think for an enhancement in 40k, looking at some of the highest cost ones at 45, then looking at some of the cheaper ones being 10 to 15 in this detachment. Obviously, this one is quite pricey, but the benefit you get, as you can see on screen, is incredible in my opinion, which is any Leagues of Votann model, so instantly opens up that massive array of units that this will be taken on. And basically it's when the bearer's unit is selected to shoot, if it's disembarked from a transport this turn, or if you spend 2 YP until the end of the phase, all your ranged weapons get sustained 2. Now this is really, really, really good. Sustain 2 as a rule, so every single 6 you're rolling to hit, or 4 up if it's beams and they're far away. Instantly is going to get you 2 more hits. Now that you can look at it from a math standpoint, you can look at it just from general logic. Every single 4 up if you're rolling for a beam, which is what I would personally take this on, now is getting you a wound due to lethal, but also then 2 additional hits, which then could potentially become another wound on top of that. It's an auto include enhancement for me. And I like how it's got the versatility as well, which sort of comes back to this whole detachments IP, right? Which is, it's all about making things like getting out of transport. Yes, you get a bonus if you do that, but once you've got out that transport, it doesn't matter at this point. You can then spend 2 YP, which then also opens up the avenues for maybe strat reserving these units, even starting them on the table, anything like that. Like I said, personally for me, it's a Iron Master. You take this on, and you take it in a big unit, 6 Thunderkin with beams. Maybe they waddle onto the table via strat reserve, sort of sit 12 inches away from the unit and blast it, and on average should probably kill it if it's not like a massive knight or something. Obviously other targets for this as well. You got the friendly car or the champion who's joining a unit of Hearthguard just to sort of up their damage output even more so. Again, reroll 1s to hit means you're more likely to potentially get some 6s in there. If you take let's say a big unit of 10 with plasmas, that's 20 shots. Should be getting about 3 6s from that alone. Rerolling the 1s, you maybe get another 1 out of that. That's then 8 extra hits. That again, it all sort of adds up. Like it's what it says on the tin, as it were. I think with this enhancement, just ups your damage output even more.
Yeah, I think that's well said. So it's like you mentioned, right? It's consistent in the sense that you don't have to jump through any hoops. You get it if you come out. You have it all the time. If you have the yield points, you will always have the yield points, and it allows you to also dump yield points, which is good. It's a nice way to just help control your intake, your influx of them, the infinity points, as many people call them, and. On the Iron Master, it's especially interesting. What I found in one of my games that I played is the Iron Master adds a new dimension to the Thunderkin units, such that depending on, if let's say you enter Fortify and you still want to get the bonus of +1 to hit, you could really string the unit out with the Corvs and then create that extra line that will allow you to get all your Thunderkin over the side of a ruin to shoot, while still being on the objective you control on your home for the benefit, which is really, really important, I think. So pretty solid enhancement. You probably always want to be taking this if you're going to run the detachment, just to get like some extra damage that goes through, some extra punch, and just get the sustained hits too, which is an amazing ability to have. All right, next up we have Precursive Judgment. So this is an interesting one that I can see an argument for taking it potentially. Haven't really found the points to take a Cal with Hearthguard with this enhancement, unfortunately, so far, but I could see a use case for it. So you put it on a Cal, and if the unit is wholly within 6 inches of a transport, the unit gets Overwatch for free and hits on 5s. This also stacks with your sustained hits you get for being wholly within 6, so you essentially Overwatch on 4s, if like, you do the math in terms of like the sustained hits, which is nice on the plasmas for sure. You probably won't be able to fit like a full 10-man unit around the transport in an optimal way. So you're probably going to take this with 5, in which case you're going to have 10 shots that hit on 4s. So you'll get like 5 plasma shots that go through, which on average should pick up a 5-man squad of Marines. So I think it's interesting. I could see a use case for it for sure. I actually am not sure how many points this one comes in at. I don't have that written down. Do you know, Jake?
15.
It's 15?
Yeah, 15.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit pricey
Yeah.
in my eyes for something that, again, this is probably one of the only instances I've really seen of that sort of whole jumping through hoops, like I've sort of said, with the wholly within 6. Now, something that is cool you can do with this is obviously use that sort of jump out stratagem at the end of your shooting phase to then get this unit out of the transport to then set up an Overwatch, because the Overwatch costs 0, then so you're only spending 1 CP to do this. Maybe the unit wants to maybe do something else like a heroic intervention potentially. But again, I think like the one thing that just bugs me with this is that it's on a Carl. It's nice, and obviously I can understand why, but maybe even something like I don't know, like you said, a Grimwib from before, even an Ironmaster, like just opens up a lot more potential that this could sort of spread to. Whereas when you're taking a Carl, for me, then I don't really run a lot of Carls in this sort of new iteration of Votann from the Codex. I think there are better characters out there, to be honest. And sadly, he sort of always just falls to the wayside. So whenever I see something with a Carl, it's Carl model only, instantly it sort of goes in the sort of reject pile, because I'm naturally just not taking them,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's unfortunate. We'll talk about this in the Need Guard video a little bit more, but we had run some numbers, and it does look like there's probably very few use cases for actually taking a Cal, especially at the current point cost compared to an E-Champ even. So it's kind of sad to see that he did get a slight change coming into the Codex, but he's still being sidelined by better options. So we have another one here with hoops involved, but this one is cute. It comes in at 5 points, which is kind of nice. I just don't see why you would have several Iron Masters, one just sitting back to heal, but anyway, you could take the lead on this one, Jake, if you want.
So this is the signature restoration. So this is simply 5 points on an Iron Master. When he goes to use his repair ability, he can repair an additional wound lost. Now that does, I think it means he heals 4.
Yeah.
That is with if he has his little friend with him. So so instantly, like, you have hit the nail straight on the head. Is why are we taking more than one Iron Master? Now, again, for people out there that may not want to take the Cyber Implant on an Iron Master with that Thunder King combo, because again, like, everybody has their own different styles.
Sure.
They may be wanting to run a solo Iron Master. They are fantastic. I used to run them all the time in the Index. Solo Iron Master, just to screen out the backfield, can be a lone operative by being near the transports, which we've spoke about already. You're taking lots of them. So the ability to be able to keep something a bit safer is nice. But again, it's 1 wound. We're not breaking the mold. We're not doing anything like that. So again, like, that 1 extra wound, especially in a meta dominated by knights, by fire dragons, by eradicators, all these sort of units I can think of off the top of my head that have these high damage weapons. They probably have killed you anyway. Healing the extra wound is sadly not going to be enough in that instance. So yeah, sad, but hey, it's 5 points. Like you said, it's cute. It's on a model that potentially can take a bit of use out of it. It could sit in our little category of if we've got some points spare. But sadly, I do think, like we've already spoken about, there's a better combo in there for the Iron Master, and then after that point, it's like, okay, well, why would you run a second thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. It'd be cool if maybe there was a world where you could take like enhancements A plus B, and then you get to like grab a little 5 point add-on after. But that's
I
another can of worms.
I think that would be a very, very cool concept, and I
That would
think
be
one
pretty
that
cool.
one that hopefully far in the future, you never know. Hopefully, whoever if you're watching this, the great voices, like listen, because that was I fully agree.
Oh, I didn't see you there, lad. If you're a hard-working dwarf like me, then you're probably always on the lookout for a really good Warhammer miniature deal. That's why I'm thrilled to announce the sponsor of today's video, Secondhand Geek. Secondhand Geek is a US-based second-hand miniature marketplace operating predominantly between the US and Canada. They offer a secure, reputable, reliable, and community-driven platform that allows you to buy and sell used minis. If you're looking to expand your Votann roster or even get started with a brand new army, Secondhand Miniature is the place to be. Consider checking them out using my affiliate link down in the description below. It lets the company know that you found their website through me and gives me a small kickback at no added cost to yourself, so I could buy more miniatures as well. With that said, let's get back to work. Cool. So that wraps up the enhancements. We'll jump into the stratagems next. And kicking it off, of course, it's the number one stratagem in this detachment, notorious in its release. Secure positions for 1 CP. So there is there is kind of like a caveat to this. You can only use it if you're in hostile acquisition, which is your first doctrine. What I have found is you usually can pretty consistently stay in it turns 1 and 2, and then with some effort, you could keep it in rounds 3 if you really wanted to. But usually, consistently, you'll have this turn 1 and turn 2. And it's basically the end of any of your phases. So this was one of the changes they made. It takes place at the any one of your phases, so not your opponent anymore. You could disembark a unit wholly within 6 inches of a transport. You cannot charge, and a turn it disembarks this way. So you can't use it to get extra distance. They kind of like nerfed the exploitative nature of it. Some people were saying like, oh, you could, like rules as written, you could drive up something, then disembark in a different phase, and then still get the charge because the transport didn't move that phase. Not intended. Obviously, happy they fixed this. But there was a small change that reduced some of its efficiency, which would be now you can only disembark in your phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like this is still a very, very powerful stratagem and is the whole reason why you would take this detachment. It just does allow you to have a lot more board control. And I do think it's a slight nerf, for sure. But from the game I played that is up on the channel now, I do actually think it still has very strong play, very strong use. I still think it's super competitive because you just get to go out onto an objective uncontested. Nobody could stop you. You can't get overwatched. You can do it at the end of your turn to deny primary extremely safely. I still think it's a very powerful strat. There are a lot of different use cases, but I'll let Jake chime in here first before I add more to it.
I fully agree. Like, so I think so over on the channel that I represent, Vanguard Tactics, we've always sort of held very much in our eyes, if we don't see if their rule comes out and we don't think it sounds a bit too good to be true, if that makes sense. We always like to play on the side of caution where we don't like to sort of fully abuse it, as it were. And again, that doesn't mean that that's wrong if people do that at all, because everybody just does things differently. It's just in the way of how I play and how I want to represent the hobby. That's how I want to sort of be seen in that competitive sense. So I never used it to do any of like Matt said, rolling stuff up, getting stuff out, charging. But instead, though, it meant that actually I got to use it in the regard that now it is sort of become, which is this whole sort of avoiding Overwatch. That's one of the best examples, that we can really give of it. Maybe a transport, maybe like a land fortress. It hasn't got a lot of targets it could shoot. Hey, it could maybe move and advance up the table and then get out of, using this ability, get out of the transport, wholly within 6 for a big unit that wants to shoot. Now,
Yeah.
you've just avoided Overwatch. Their threat range has just become massive. There's so many instances where this is still great. Like you obviously alluded to, the swinging of primary, the ability to be able to do actions. So another good example that I could think of this is it's the end of the shooting phase. You know, you didn't know if you were going to kill the sort of target on the objective, which would mean that maybe you had to do an action or hold an objective or anything like that. You didn't want to put the unit out willy-nilly. Okay, you've killed the unit. Now you can get this unit out, do any actions you need to, and you're sorted in that regard. So I do think this is still a great stratagem. Now, obviously, people naturally will, you know, it's not as good as it was, and that's fine. That's just to be said. It is a nerf.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. We can use the word. It's not nothing. It's not going to hurt us. It's okay. But it still is great. I think that it's got loads and loads of uses, and yes, I know one very powerful use of it may have gone, but there are still, for every one that's gone, there's still 5 or 6 positive uses that you can use this for. And the more and more you play this attachment, it will reward you in the instance of really understanding when you should be using this stratagem, when you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the skill of the players that want to play this attachment, to be able to sort of look at it, identify it, but also act on it as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
I like this strat.
Well said. Yeah, I think the more comfortable you are with kind of your overall game strategy, your ability to stage, deploy, even going back to list building like we alluded to earlier, I think the more value you will get out of this stratagem. And it is a very powerful stratagem. Your opponent can try to play around it, of course, right? Like they could clog up an objective and say, oh, okay, like now you can't disembark here. I'll stop you here. But it's just a lot of work that your opponent has to do to stop you from doing this, which is valuable, right? Because you force them to commit resources, more material, maybe at a rate that they're not comfortable with. Like now they got to sacrifice 2 units to hold an objective instead of just 1. It forces kind of like these, I would say, like poorer trades for your opponent to have to do. Generally, and it gives you a lot more control over the game because now you could, like Jake said, just a Sagittar, for example, advances up. You're in hostile acquisition, you reroll your advance rolls, right? You pull like a 4 or a 5, you move like 16 inches, and now suddenly the objective marker that they were hoping you wouldn't be able to reach, you just disembark 6 inches extra on top of that, so 20-inch threat range to touch an objective marker with warriors who are going to be 2 OC each. Pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of use, and like you said, like even for the avoiding overwatch, if you want to shoot something and get like a further threat range, there are so many little tricks. Like it's something that really rewards you, I think, for just looking at the board, taking your time to kind of analyze all the firing lanes, all the staging points, and not abusing it in the sense of like exploitatively using it, but abusing the fact that you can push really aggressively on a goal turn and kind of circumvent some of those limitations that you otherwise couldn't. And some stratagems here further help support this, as we'll see in a bit, with going through walls, for example. Speaking of, so Jake, you want to walk us through this one?
Oh, for gladly, it's probably one of my favourites.
Yeah.
So this is called Bastion running. So simply put, this is your movement phase. You pick one land fortress from your army that hasn't moved, and now until the end of the phase, each time you make a normal move or advance, it can move horizontally through terrain features. Okay, it can just go through them. Now this is, I think, any now obviously this will be an interesting talking point. I think any stratagem like this is just purely amazing. Like there's no you can make it into a square, a circle. It's still, we all call it the same thing at the end of the day in that regard. It's just amazing. So you know, one of the biggest things when you know you look at the competitive scene and you think about the logics behind it, and you think about tournament organizers, whether they are the GW Open, whether it's UKTC here in the UK, the WTC, the biggest factor they all think of is terrain.
Yeah.
And how that impacts the game, and how you have firing lanes. And like, let's be honest, right? We've all sat there in probably WhatsApp group chats, Discords. Oh, I hate this map. It's got too many firing lanes. Well, at least you can't move this through it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, this now instantly means you can. So by taking that, so good, you know, for example, over here in the UK, like I said, we play the UKTC. If you're watching at home and you attend any of those events, you would know that in their sort of new layout, they have this massive ruin in the middle of the table. Okay, it's like the big ruin. I don't know how to read. It's like a 3-story hide ruin. Okay, so like basically nothing can see over it unless you're like a knight or Magnus or something like that.
Okay.
So biggest factor here is that you can't just drive a land fortress to the middle of the table. You have to sort of go the long way round, as it were. And and then if you did want to do that naturally without having to use a stratagem like this, you are putting it on the sides. It's then in line of sight. It's potentially going to be shot turn one, and that's just all very sad. Now you instantly unlock this by going, okay, well, I can now move big model through the middle into the middle of the table, dump a load of models onto the objective if you need to. Can be very aggressive with things like again, if we're looking at it from the point of view of maybe doing something like Thunderkin, you could maybe on this exact instance, the only reason I use this map so much is because I'm so used to it in the UK, is using Bastion runnings or turn one, like you set up land fortress in that middle ruin. Now I know it's not doing a lot, but you've got to bear with us here. Then what you do is next turn, you've staged this land fortress into the middle of the table. Maybe it's protruding this aura to allow other units to then get these benefits to be able to shoot. Then next turn, 1 CP Bastion running goes through the building into the middle of the table. So it's now on the middle objective. It probably can see down to each side objectives. It can see through your opponent's line to their deployment zone, through into any sort of areas. It's in a really, really good position. Then, at the end of that movement phase, you dump out a big unit of Thunderkin on the other side of a wall, potentially, and now it can just see everything in your opponent's army and can just shoot it with free will, regardless of what they have. So, there's a lot of layers to stratagems like this, and it doesn't... I'm not going to say the word break the game, because I don't like using instances like that, and it definitely doesn't, but it definitely changes one of the core aspects of a game, which is terrain.
Yep.
And so yeah, obviously I don't know your thoughts on all of that, but
yeah, I think that's exceptionally said. You touched on something very important, which is the amount of impact terrain has on list building and your macro strategy as well. And now you have an ability here to just ignore that like completely. Yeah. You could get to a staging point immediately. You could push out from a staging point and go anywhere you want. And like you mentioned, you have ways to combo this with even the disembark strat. So now you move through a wall. Your opponent's trying to pre-measure. Your opponent has to pre-measure everything, right? It's like, how do I avoid getting shot by this unit of Thunderkin? I can't. If I poke out, I die. And you can go anywhere you want. You can drive through a wall and then disembark 6 inches with the other strat, and now suddenly you see the whole board. There's also really cool interactions where, for example, on many of the GW maps, it's pretty easy to, from the center, I'd say like near your expansion and the middle objective, if you park a land fortress in the middle, you could disembark wholly within 6 and get guys in a 10-man unit touching both objectives. So again, this is really powerful because you could Bastion run out and then dump OC on both objectives in the middle of the table, which is pretty nice. So your opponent just has to think a lot more about where they're going to be positioning or how they're going to answer your threats, your projection that you're going to be putting out there. It's just incredible. Like, instead of having to stage a little bit safer and taking like 2 turns to get somewhere, like Jake said, you just go right there and then you move to the next one through the wall. You just ignore that turn 1. And it is CP heavy, but we have Uthar, who really helps with this quite a bit, because now you can consistently, once per round, use one of these strats for free, whether it's the disembark, whether it's the move through a wall. So there's a lot of good synergy, I think, and again, it just rewards you for having a really solid overall game plan when you reach a table, and analyzing those terrains and seeing like, okay, this is where I need to be, and I could get there very easily. So a really powerful strat.
Yeah, 100%. I think, just to touch on your point just before we move on to the next one, is that exact sort of thing you just said there, and you've hit the nail perfectly, is that sort of understanding where you can put models. Like, a lot of people like to sort of, like a lot of very high-end competitive players, or people just sort of, trying to up their game naturally, as you do, like you do in any sort of competitive game, whether that's a card game, war game, anything like that. They like to map everything out and have an idea of where you want to put things. Yeah. So if we know, for example, that here in the UK or in GW Open, that there's 2 places a land fort can sit, move efficiently, and also not be shot. So then that instantly means for list creation that you go, okay, well, realistically, I can only take 2. Now, this sort of stratagem now allows for either one of 2 things. the third to potentially be put in a list, which could then create a massive sort of weight on your opponent that they're playing against for that sort of stat check style. But also, it also means that even if you don't want to take a third land fortress, it now means that those two land fortresses potentially have other places
Mm-hmm.
they can be placed, which then has to, like you said, your opponent now has to sort of be thinking, okay, well, you know, if they play, let's say Votann are very prevalent in the meta, lots of people will be doing lots of research on them, meaning that your opponents would be a lot more sort of well versed when playing against them on the higher tables as you're going X and O potentially, or X and one and all that.
Mm-hmm.
When you then enter that sort of period of going, a lot of people like they go on TTS and sort of map it all out and go, okay, well, I know that I can get this angle here. The spanner is thrown in the works to go, you can do that, but equally, because of my, you know, this detachment gives me this stratagem, I can now put it in literally an area that the thing has no right to be able to move, and it just goes through the wall. And now that then changes the whole dynamic of not just your game plan, but your opponent's as well. And I think that's just something to note on before we move on to the
Yeah,
next point.
yeah. It keeps your opponent constantly thinking, which is what I found when I played it the other day. And I was called. My opponent said this reminds him of Eldari, and I said, "Yeah, you know what? I'm really happy to hear that because we have tricks now that keep our opponent a little bit more honest and make the game plan, like you said, they have to try to adapt their game plan a lot more frequently during the game instead of just old Votann, which was super straightforward in terms of what we're doing."
Yeah.
Okay, next one, pretty simple. We don't have to spend too much on this one. Illuminated priority, I think it's really cute. So you get in the shooting phase after a vehicle shoots at a unit, all your other infantry, they reroll hit rolls of 1 against that target. So this is great into something like a huge anvil unit, like, I don't know, like Mortarion, for example. You shoot it with a carrier, and then everybody else gets to reroll hit rolls of 1, which is pretty nice. Just helps you get a little bit more consistently, get your damage through. Combos well with sustained hits 1 for anything next to a vehicle, because now that 1 could potentially turn into a 6, which is 2 more shots. So I think that's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
This is great. Again, like farming for your Thunderkin,
Mm-hmm.
for your Volkite stuff. Again, it comes back into that conversation we had previous regarding reroll ones. You know, gets you less likely for the failure points to happen, more likely that you're then going to roll those sixes. You get another shot at it, as it were.
Yeah.
And the fact that also just any transport can do this, and it's not like any of those other stratagems where it's normally one links with the other
Mm-hmm.
to then let it do that. The fact that just your whole army then gets to do this is, well, only infantry, but a lot of your army is infantry, right?
Yeah.
Then just opens that up. So yeah, really good stratagem. Love it.
Yeah, it really helps with. I know some of the concerns people have when they compare this detachment to Need Guard is the you have like a lot less firepower, a lot less output. This helps mitigate some of that because you become a little bit more consistent for sure.
Yeah.
Next up, we have here. You could take us through this one, Jake. An exorable efficiency.
Yeah, again, like a stratagem that I think anybody, whenever you see any detachment in 40k, regardless of what army you play, just instantly smiles. Like the fact that you can fall back and do something. In this case, it is shoot.
Yeah.
Now, again, we are used to fall back and charge in other detachments. So the fact you can't do that is a bit sad. But again, it doesn't really fit the MO of this detachment. You know, it's all about shooting, really,
Mm-hmm.
as we've sort of gone through. But one massive upside of this stratagem is the fact you have to use it in the shooting phase. And I really like stratagems that do this. And the main reason for this is so then you're not preemptively spending CP for no reason. So again, like example A could be I've fallen back with a unit that I just don't want it to die in combat. It's now going to shoot, a unit B is now going to shoot at the unit I was in combat with. Oh, dang, I didn't kill it. Okay, now I'll spend 1 CP to shoot at this unit, because you can do it at any point. It's not like you do it at the start. It's not like you do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
at the end. And yeah, I just love stratagems that let you do this. Again, another example of why this is good in the shooting phase is I fall back with my unit. I have to spend 1 CP because at the end of my fallback move, it says, that's when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You spend 1 CP, they then shoot at you, kill the unit. Overwatch, shoot the unit, kill it. It's now dead.
Yeah.
You just spend 1 CP to do nothing, basically.
I'm really happy you mentioned that. I didn't even catch that. You're right. It's in the shooting phase. I wrote it here and I didn't even catch it. But yeah, it's in the shooting phase. That's really good, actually, because it gives you way more agency over your resources to know if you actually need to spend the CP or not. Which is amazing. That's so good. Oh my god. Can't believe I missed
Yeah,
that.
do you know what? Do you know why? I think it's just because we're so used to seeing stratagems be done at the end of
Mm,
unit's move. And there are very, very few stratagems like this in the game. I think the only other army I can really think of that has one is Eldar, maybe. Again,
probably.
this is like going through the memory banks,
Yeah.
but like I just like stratagems that really have a bit of flexibility. And I think what's nice as well as a generalistic thing, the Votann Codex. It'll be interesting to see your thoughts on this as well.
Mm,
Is that I feel the Votann book is really unique in the aspect of obviously it is all the other codexes have come out. You can obviously tell there's writing and learning from how
mm,
you sort of write and do these things. And I feel the Votann Codex got a lot of love in that regard because you can tell that it's maybe someone has gone, well, do you know what? I'm fed up of falling a unit back and then spending a CP and then it was just useless anyway. So
yeah.
the fact that you can do this, it means give you a bit more tactical flexibility. It also means that you're then not just preemptively spending CP. You're only having to spend them when you need to, which ironically is efficient,
Yeah.
like the thing says.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It is absolutely efficient. You're right. Oh my
yeah.
God. Wow. I can't believe I missed. I was so worried I had a typo here and I was like, we're going to have to go back and refilm this. But oh my God. That is so well
I,
designed. That is honestly so well designed for a stratagem. That's
Yeah.
great.
No, I love it. And do you know what? I had to double check it as well. If people are wondering why I keep looking to the side, it's because I've got the app open on my phone on the side, so I can just read them as they say it. And I had to double check because when I saw it on your slide, I then
Yeah.
had to go double check it. But yeah, just such a great stratagem, and again one that I think any Votann connoisseur will be very happy to see in any detachment, but especially in this one because again, it's all about shooting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Okay. So this one here, opportunistic escalation. Um, must be in hostile acquisition. So I haven't actually really had a use case for this in any of the games I've played. I only tried one with the detachment. It just never really felt like it came up because I wasn't running Sagittars. I think there's an argument to run Sagittars in this detachment for sure, but you can't use it on forts, and it's D6 move. You could poke a little something out behind a ruin corner. I just feel like there's better things to spend CP on, especially when you're in hostile acquisition, being the first one we spoke about. But you essentially get to reactive move a vehicle after you've been shot, just like Star Shatter does, essentially. The problem
Yeah.
I find is our vehicles aren't as tanky, the ones you're going to use this on anyway, as the ones in Star Shatter. Like the carriers will just die if they're shot. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this one or any cool use cases
It's
I'm not seeing?
um do you know what? I think the use cases are so niche that if they do come up, people would miss them regardless of whether we spoke about them or not.
Yeah.
So, like the one thing that I could even just see this as a slight use for is just moving something onto an objective for OC or just moving something out of line of sight. But
Yeah.
again, like we spoke about, it sort of comes back to that sort of that enhancement we spoke about where it heals an extra wound. Is we live in a meta where if the thing is looking at the tank and it's going to shoot the tank, it most likely has the damage just to kill the tank
Yeah.
because of how the sort of game is sort of constructed at the moment with a lot of the codexes and with the meta as it were with Chaos Knights and they
Yeah.
are quite prevalent. Imperial Knights are about to drop as well.
Yeah.
Things like Death Guard as well. So high damage is just rampant. And the one thing this would be good on is a fort, but you can't do it on a fort. So then instantly just it's sad, but we have to have some stratagems that aren't as useful
Yeah.
because otherwise that's where we start getting nerfs and then everyone gets even more sad. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm fine with this. Very niche, but again, it's yeah, nah,
Yeah, well said.
nah.
Super niche. Maybe there will be a time when something is shot, it doesn't die, and you're like, hey, I could save this resource. I have the CP. I'll just move it, touch an objective, hide, get more value out of it. It's totally possible.
Yeah.
This one here, Vengeance Flare. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Jake, because at the start, when I was going through it, reading, I was like, this one I feel like won't ever really come up. But I was shocked at how frequently I was threatening my opponent to use this stratagem. Not even having to use it, just threatening them that I
And
have this available.
Yeah, and do you know what? Again, I'll read what the strat does for the
Yeah.
viewers, then we'll unpack what you just said there because I think that's such an interest. Again, that comes into the sort of how I look at the game and the
Mm,
ideologies and all of this, right? So Vengeance Flare. So if you're not sure what it does, it's two CP. So again, it's a two CPer. So naturally, it puts people off a bit. But again, we've got to remember that we now have Ufar, who is really good at just sort of
hmm
telling people to not spend as many CPs, and people luckily listen to him, so that's good.
Yeah.
So this is in your shooting phase, just after an only history shot, it's one Leagues of Votann infantry unit that was hit by one or more of those attacks. So again, hit, don't have to lose any models, so that's good. It's not like one of those where normally it's things die and then everybody gets sad. So then it is you use the stratagem, and before you use the stratagem, so when you say you're going to do it, you then decide if you're going to spend 2 YP. So if you don't spend 2 YP, a Capricus model or a Sagittar can do this. Now, key thing, Capricus does allow then the defenders to do this as well.
Yes.
Which is an interesting point, because I do like the defenders, but again, like, you're probably going to spend the 2 YP, because if you do, you can select Land Fortress. And then what happens is that basically then that model that you picked can now shoot at the unit that shot your infantry unit. So there's a lot of instances where, like, again, this sort of comes up, and so you've got one instance of you could just not be playing against a shooting army where they're going to threaten you with this. So if you played against something like World Eaters, maybe even Orcs to an extent, this stratagem also maybe sits in the useless pile. But it's an interesting point that you said at the very start of when we spoke about this stratagem, which is the threat of it, the mind games, the sort of psychological effect it has on a game. Now, I've played a lot of games of 40k, as you have, as a lot of us have, and I think I can probably say I've watched my opponents probably more use their time on their chess clock if you're at an event and you use them, stressing about how they're going to play around certain stratagems than actually ever seeing them in the first place.
Yep.
and then that instantly creates this whole sort of logic of, is it worth it? Because if they go, yeah, but you never use that stratagem, it goes, yeah, but you spent about good 20 to 30 minutes worrying about that stratagem. You then had to do everything in certain orders that maybe you didn't necessarily want to. You had to play around the stratagem and the ideals and how that I can't use my stratagem. But actually, by you even just doing that, that then actually means the stratagem does work.
Yeah.
And then if they do just sort of rip the band-aid, which is sort of my new catchphrase on playing 40k, and just go, do you know what? I'm just going to shoot the unit. I need to kill it. If I lose the unit in return, that's fine. Best thing, big unit of Thunderkin. We know it has loads of durable wounds with the little sort of obligatory wounds. If they're not clever about how they shoot, you can maybe even leave one guy left. Instantly, Land Fortress gets all angry and then starts shooting at the opponent. And as we know, Land Fortresses are quite efficient at their shooting, especially with their sort of newfound profiles.
Yeah.
So, it's like a win-win in that regard. Now, again, it may not come up every game, and like we said, it's 2 CP. That's a lot of CP. We're very thankful we've got UFAR that can allow us to manipulate that. But ultimately, when we look at it from that sort of hypothetical sense of, well, yes, I didn't use it once, but equally you then had to stress about how you're gonna go about things. Maybe you're having to then spend resources to do things like grenades on units, which you may have wanted to use those resources for other things. So yeah, I like this stratagem from that contextual area of which is what you said, and again expertly put, is that it's the mind game side. It's that fourth dimension that, again, not a lot of people sometimes look at when you look at sort of playing games on on the boards and stuff, especially if you're looking at it from obviously a lot of people, whether casually, obviously you may not see it as much, but when you're looking at all those sort of competitive levels, those are all the sort of factors. And again, it's the stratagem that if it's round 5 in an event, you've played 4 quite intense games of 40k potentially, especially if you're on those sort of higher tables, and someone comes up and they're super tired and everything, like, that's just another layer that they have to deal with, is that mind game side of it. And yeah, it's interesting because I never used to look at like things like this in that context. And I've started playing some like competitive card games recently and all of this in my sort of spare time, and it's actually something that's taught me a lot about that sort of the fear of knowing, or the fear of having information, as it were.
Yeah.
Where it's like, let's say if we use this in a card game sense, again, I know if you're unfamiliar with how card games work, you probably have played Top Trumps or anything like that, especially if you're in the UK, you know what that is. And the idea of, let's say you play a card that shows me your hand, and then I show you my hand, and you see there's a card in there that is terrifying. you then instantly are like, oh well, now I've got to think about that now.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking all these ways about playing around it, when actually I could just then maybe put it into my resource row or do these things. Same with this. You know, if we look at it back on the tabletop example, you know, how many times have you played a game, Matt, and someone's gone, oh, you don't have enough CP to interrupt now. Oh, you don't have enough CP to Overwatch now. Oh, you don't have enough CP to heroically
Yep.
intervene now. And
Yep.
it's the same sort of, oh, you don't have enough CP to Vengeance Flare now. And yeah, that's how I see it. And I think having
Yeah.
this in the arsenal of stratagems, especially when we've already spoken about 4 quite really good ones,
Yeah.
this is just one that you may not need to use, but your opponent will always be sat there going, okay, well, I need to bear in mind that I could just get shot by a land fortress in my turn, and that would be very sad.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. It's exactly that. Like the threat, it won't always come up, but the threat of it is very real, and there will be practical use cases where you'll see this. Just banking a CP, previously because of how the first stratagem, the disembark one, was worded, you could do it in your opponent's turn. You were always kind of holding a CP for that anyway if you were playing this detachment. Now with Uthar giving you one for free and then you holding one, you could threaten this very consistently and reliably. I thought it was invaluable. There's the game that you could watch on the channel that I posted this week on Monday. It probably is when it came out, whenever this comes out. But you'll be able to see in round 1 or 2, I essentially get to just kind of poke the land fort out a little bit within 6 of the Jaegers in the center of the table, and my opponent does not have an answer to solve that question. Like, how does he get the Jaegers off the center of the table? There's no way to do it, and I end up scoring primary for it. So it's the threat of it. You don't even have to use Vengeance Flare. It's just telling your opponent, I have the option to ruin your day. Do you want to take the chance? And we'll see what they do from there.
Yeah, it fully is. And yeah, I think it's again like when people sort of, hopefully if you're watching and you're enjoying and everything, can make sure you give Matt loads of love because he is a hero of this community, in my opinion.
Thanks, man.
It's all right, and I'll have the payment later for that. And I think the big thing here to note is that like we want to try and give you as much information as possible, and so you can go in and when you're sort of sat there and you're even whether you're a brand new Votann player and you're looking at the armies and you're not really sure what to play, or equally you're a seasoned veteran and maybe you're wanting to try something new. These are all the things that hopefully that no matter what, you can then look at the rest of the book and go, okay, well, I remember when Matt and Jake did this video and we were watching, and they were saying about these sort of stratagems that threaten people more than actually do anything. So it's a valuable lesson to learn. So yeah, I like this stratagem. Again, you go check out the game because I can imagine it. Watch it, like the idea of just a unit of Jaegers being sat in the middle of the board on a primary objective, and your opponent just going, "Well, I literally can't do anything about that. That is silly."
45 points and they can't stop it. Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you. But
that's right.
So, with the stratagems out of the way, let's take some time to talk about the key takeaways. So, I think from everything we discussed, putting it all together, I think obviously it's very clear that this detachment has a massive emphasis on transports and the cargo that it is carrying. So, these are going to be some of the key decisions you're going to have to make, not even just in list building, but also when you get to the table. Depending on the matchup, what is going to be riding inside of what and where are you going to put it? I think there's another big emphasis on controlling your yield points more so than other detachments to stay in hostile probably as long as you can. Probably turns 1 to 3 ideally. Usually it'll just be the first 2 turns and maximizing use out of that disembark strat. Like Jake mentioned a few times, staging to use secure positions is key. Not just for primary, but also, like he said, for being able to threaten longer firing ranges, getting into position somewhere, like moving a land fortress to the wall, and now suddenly you unlock this whole new firing lane your opponent wasn't expecting, and dodging overwatch, things like that. So there are a lot of good use cases for this. Just that the fact that you can't use it in your opponent's turn doesn't necessarily kill it. It just means you need to be a little bit more deliberate with how you're using this on your turn and maximizing those uses. I think on a similar note, that means your macro strategy is very important, going to the table, looking at the terrain, like Jake said as well, and kind of figuring out where you need to be, where you can potentially be with access to these stratagems. And with that said, of course, positioning and proper deployment here are crucial. Jake, do you have any other key takeaways you want to add in to kind of just closing thoughts on the detachment as a whole?
As I said, like I think I said at the very start, that when I first read the book, this was one that did just jump out of the page at me, and it still does. And I think that is really the sort of, I think like your first impression and your 10th impression are as important as each other, because your first impression is just you reading something and not even having anything in practice, whereas your 10th is you've played a load with maybe loads of different things, and the fact that it still gives you that same sort of, oh, this is really good, means that it is actually good, rather than either having a knee-jerk reaction or overhyping something. So yeah, I think this is very good, and I think it will remain as maybe one of the go-to competitive detachments for Votann players. I think the Need Guard and the Delve sort of, in my opinion, sit there at the sort of top of the pops, as it were, with all the sort of good things they can provide. And I think that this is just a really good attachment, and I think the only times you may not see this as very good is if maybe either direct nerf, so you have again, like, as a lot of people may know how this works already, I also when I look at my 40k philosophies, I look at things like direct and indirect nerf. So a direct nerf is literally, it's telling you, so secure positions would be a direct nerf, it's literally had to change the wording of a stratagem on your page. An indirect nerf is something around you has happened that you didn't have any say in. So the only downside of this detachment currently is that we live in a meta where, because a lot of big models are prevalent, a lot of people are taking high AP, high damage weapons, we don't really have any vulnerable saves on our transports, meaning they can die easier. That is an indirect nerf to us, because that's not anything we can do anything about. But I think regardless of that fact, it's still a good detachment, and one that will see, in my opinion, quite a lot of play, and will still be good with time to come. Again, the only other thing I could see where this didn't become very good is, again, maybe some points changes. If the land fort maybe went up again or anything like that, you then maybe are having to sort of look at other detachments where you can get a bit more bang for your buck. But no, I think it's good.
Yeah, well said. It's an interesting idea about the indirect nerfs and the direct nerfs. I never really thought about it like that, but you got me thinking there's even kind of like an indirect buff that happened with this data slate, despite the direct nerf, is that the challenger cards are gone, which means that differential you could get by denying primary is more meaningful now in this detachment, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, like I've always lived by. I think everybody, like, like a slight tangent. Everybody, regardless of playing 40k at whatever level, everybody has their own different views on things. Like, again, a lot of my view is built around the fantastic people I've had the privilege of playing. Like, so people like Brian Sepp is a good example from Team America. A lot of the Team Ignite guys, obviously my own guys at Team Vanguard Tactics 6++. I have an array of people that I love bouncing ideas off of and doing all this, and I build my 40k philosophies and the gaming in general off of the people around me. And like, I've always looked at things as direct, indirect, and how, for example, some people sit there and go, "Oh, how come you don't see this unit anymore?" Because nothing happened to it. It's the same with armies, to an extent. So, like, so you've seen, like, I remember when Blood Angels, like, they're obviously back to being quite good, especially here in the UK due to the terrain layouts. They do really benefit from it. But a lot of people at one point, they saw a bit of a fall off. And nothing really happened to them. It was just simply everything around them was a lot better. So either people move and do all that. So, again, if you look at the games and maybe look at the sort of, when you're building lists and doing these, you've always got to think of, obviously, yes, this is my list and this is what's very good and this is what helps me. And again, when we talk about, like, my list as well, like, I've put some of those sort of ethoses in there. But then also thinking about, okay, well, yes, I could take, loads of transports, but then if my opponent, which most likely he will, we're all prepped for all these big knights, well, what kills a big knight sadly also kills a land fort. Probably actually more so kills a land fort. But, yeah,
that's the unfortunate part, is that the wider meta, and like you said, so aptly put, like, how you evaluate what the meta actually is does dictate a lot of the times what is viable, just in terms of, like, an army comp, and to a greater extent even what army you'll see around as well. So these are all big considerations to keep in mind. So with that said, guys, let's jump into two lists, one from myself, one from Jake, to help get you started if you're interested in trying out this detachment. All right, guys. So jumping in with the first list here, I'll take you through mine, and then we'll take a quick look at Jake's. So this is, of course, for BRANDFAST. I'm running Uthar the Destined. He's essential. You need him, as we mentioned several times across not only my videos, but everybody else's videos as well. You just always take him for that CP generation. I still think he's very valuable in this one, even if you're not using the disembark strat as often. To be able to threaten the shoot back from your land fortress, I think is great. Just gives you some extra resources, and he's a nice piece to have. I then have an Iron Master with the Trivarg Cyber Implant, which we mentioned here, I think is an auto take, just to give that nice output through to the unit he's accompanying. I got a double Memnir Strategist here, so one is going to be solo on my home objective, and the other one, depending on the matchup, you could run solo as well, or you could attach him to some Steeljacks, which we'll see a little later in the list. I then have 10 Hearthkin Warriors, just a single set of 10. I actually really liked how they perform in this detachment because it's just a bunch of OC to dump on objectives, and like we mentioned earlier, depending on where you position your land fortress, you could have these guys all dump out onto 2 objectives in no man's land with a significant amount of OC. Then 2 units of 6 Thunderkin. I have a 6-man SP conversion. I go with the Iron Master, and then I have a 6-man Graviton for the anti-tank, anti-monster. There's a lot of flexibility in this list in terms of what rides in what, so you kind of have the option to, depending on the matchup, put something on the board, something in reserve, start everything on the table, or choose which land fortress you want to have things inside of. I went with double Earthshaker here, a little bit of a controversial choice, but I quite like them. You could take a look at how they performed for me in the recent game I posted on the channel. I think they're really nice to force battle shocks, get rid of defensive abilities, things like that. Probably not super needed in this detachment as you play more of like an independent primary game, but I still think they're pretty cool, and I'm going to keep experimenting with them. They have the Tremor Shells, not the Breachers. Double set of 10 Jaegers that combat squad into the 5s. With the carriers, I then have a 6-man Steeljack with melee weapons, a 3-man bike squad that's going to allow us to just threaten primary turn 1. And then I have double land fortresses here. They're going to have the Magna Rails, so do not take the Cyclic Ions. They're going to have the Magna Rails, and then the double carrier to wrap the list off. Like I said, super flexible, very adaptable. You can also put, if you're against like a melee pressure list, a single set of 10 Jaegers in a big line, and then split the other one inside of the carriers instead if you prefer. And then you have a lot of options when it comes to what you start on the table, off the table, or inside of each one of the land fortresses. I'm a big fan of Sagittars in this one as well, but I haven't had a chance to experiment with them yet, so didn't feel super comfortable recommending that. But we'll jump into Jake's next and have him walk us through his and how he sees it playing.
Awesome. So let's start off with the man of the moment. That is Uthar the Destined. Again, Matt hit the nail on the head. The man's auto include. He is an amazing piece, and like we've already spoken about, CP manipulation is massive with things like vectorers in general. So the fact that he can make that sort of null and void, but also make certain things you do free even better. I've also copied Matt in the regards of having an Iron Master with the Cyber Implant. Again, we spoke about that at length. It's the best enhancement in the detachment. One of the main reasons you'd also take the detachment, so it'd be silly for us to miss it as well. Bury Agneson is something where I've gone a bit different with Matt, and the reason is it's something we spoke about in that sort of when we talk about the detachment, and we had those little tangents of sort of philosophies and doing all this. And the reason I like this model is that he gives you a bit of combat pressure. He gives you a bit of a counter hit. Now, he may not kill 5 scouts, as me and Matt have discussed, but what he does is he allows you to have a piece that can maybe counter punch potentially. He's also a lone operative, which means that he can sort of waddle around on his own and maybe do cards for you. He can hunker down points. He can threaten things like heroic intervention. He also has that sort of surge move as we know it, where if he's shot, he can move towards you to maybe enter combat, and he also can get back up on a 2-up. So I think with that sort of list of accolades with what he gives, and something the list lacks is that sort of bit of a combat pressure. Like, yes, he may not kill those sort of 5 sort of average models, but maybe into a maybe elite unit, maybe something like an 8-bound unit, where they've got the sort of 3 wounds each with no feel, no pain or anything like that. He could potentially sort of put a bit of hurt onto them, or even just tie them up as well. So that's something we need to look at. Then I've got 10 Hearthkin Warriors. Again, I've also opted to, I'll just say it now, to not go with a Sagittar. I feel that I have used them, and I do think they're okay at their 95 point price cost. But I think that how I want to be seeing this unit is to sit with Ufar, and allow them to sort of be obligatory wounds for him, but also be a lot of OC as well. So they're going to sort of chill with him, and they're going to be a little combo package where they could potentially go hit up if they need to be a bit aggressive, maybe put some OC, but also string along the backfield and make sure that Ufar is not only safe, but also the area is screened as well. Then in other data sheets, we've got a unit of 6 Thunderkin with C beams. Again, I had to copy Matt in that regard. It's just the unit. It's the unit of the detachment, in my opinion. So again, we're just sort of doubling down on the efficiencies of this very important enhancement by making sure we have a unit that really can make the most out of it, rather than taking a unit that could be suboptimal. Which I feel like, again, you could put this enhancement on anything and it be efficient. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that you could take it on the beams and it makes it like all that more efficient just means that it justifies the 30 points that you're paying for it even more so. Then this is where I've gone a bit different to Matt. So I've actually gone with 2 units of 3 Thunderkin rather than the unit of 6. Now, there's a few reasons for this, and one of them will come up later into the list where we look at how many transports I've got. But I like units of 3. I like the idea that you could have 2 units of 3 in 2 separate land fortresses, maybe comboed with another unit in the list as well, being berserkers, which I'll go on to in a second. They can strip cover potentially, so you can have them, one unit shoot at one thing, strip cover. In that regard, that then helps sort of maybe free up a lot of your other options that you have. And just by having 2 points of that on the battlefield as well, maybe in separate areas, it creates for that sort of line of sight, that sort of ability to be able to strip 2 units worth of cover. A third with then the Thunderkin unit now means you've got 3 instances of ignoring cover rather than just the 2. So I think that's also just a personal thing. Also, I've always been a big fan of that sort of MSU, so if you're familiar with that term, multiple small units. So the fact that also this also, if it needs to, is an 80-point unit that can do an action. It could maybe represent some OC, it could block out an area. I like that a lot as well. Then I've got 2 units of 5 berserkers. Now this is where again, we sort of look at this and we go, okay, well, they're sort of in for the same reason as Beery Agnesson, so they represent a combat threat. Something that the list lacks. It's damage free as well, which also, into those big elite matchups is really good. I have opted for the mauls. Now, I am really unsure on if you want axes or mauls. I think that's a big debate that's going to rage on throughout the Votann community for quite a while. Now, the big reason I like them is, again, when we're looking at the current meta we're in as of... it's September 2025, which is mad to think we're in September.
Yeah.
At that current moment, we're looking at a lot of sort of high armored vehicles and monsters. So because of that, I feel the mauls are slightly better with the anti-monster vehicle 3+, flat damage 3, -2. Yes, they don't get a lot of things from the detachment, but they act as a counterpunch for something that maybe not a lot of people would expect when you read at the top of someone's army list, it being the BRANDFAST OATHBAND. But also, I like this unit because it can sit in a land fortress with a unit of 3 Thunderkin as well. And they create like that nice little package of, this is a land fortress that has a bit of combat, a bit of shooting to threaten areas of the table.
Nice.
Yeah, I think maybe, like, again, if we move into a meta where we're seeing less knights and all of that, axes will be a lot better. But I've always been a fan of them all, so I've sort of just gone with my gut there. Then I've got I'm going to skip over the transport. I'm going to talk about all the transports at the end. But I'm going to then talk about some Jaegers. So, yeah, we do have them. Just a super, super amazing unit. The fact that we do have 1 Capricus carrier. So to split them makes that a really, really efficient package. Like we were saying earlier, they work out as 45 points a unit. They can walk on something. They represent 5 AC. They represent 5 28mm bases to be able to screen out areas. They have a built-in reactive move to maybe either create instances of moving into that Vengeance Flare range, then make our opponent more scared. They can equally hop back into a Capricus. They can go behind walls. They can do all this sort of stuff, right? So this unit represents a lot of value, and I think where we're now not taking that Sagittar combo, this is where the combo we need to look at. Then I've got a unit of Ironkin Steeljacks with heavy Volkite disintegrators. Now, you went with the melee weapon ones, didn't you?
Yes, I did, and I accidentally put yours with melee as well, so I'll
Oh,
swap
no,
them.
so I didn't even notice that. So the reason I've gone with the Volkite is purely because we have 3 instances of ignoring cover in the list. Now, so that then means their -1 becomes more efficient. because unless your opponent wants to be spending their resources on something like an Armor of Contempt style stratagem, which is again unfamiliar with that term, it's all about reducing AP. AP1 doesn't look as valuable. Whereas if they want to use their sort of resources to do that, at least we know they can't combo it with Ignor's cover. They also represents a lot of shots, which I feel we miss out in the list. We miss out on a lot of infantry killing shots. We're looking at, we're so focused on those big things because that meta we're looking in. This is the sort of unit where I feel it can really hit that curve, hit that sort of curveball you may have, and go, okay, well, yes, I see your 20 Tormagants, whatever they are, and I raise you 36 Valkyrie shots, and they should kill them all. And just naturally, they also synergize with the detachment as well. They shoot, so that because of that, it instantly means their value there.
Yeah.
Then we're going to talk about the transports. So I've already mentioned a Capricus carrier. That splits Jaegers, but it's not the big one, is it? It's 3 land fortresses. Now, this comes under multiple things. So first things first, I love land fortresses. I think they're one of the best data sheets in the whole book. But on top of that as well, they are just mega efficient, okay? And this attachment makes that even more so. So again, we have that Bastion running to sort of manipulate terrain maps, to sort of throw curveballs at our opponents. So when I was speaking about that earlier in the stratagems, and we spoke about that whole ideology of, the one thing that every layout, every version of how people play has in common is we all use terrain. It's the fact that then your opponent can sit on something like TTS, or even just like on a Canva or something, and map out deployments of where certain things can go. Nothing can then prepare you for a land fortress that can start wherever it wants and then move wherever it wants. So I think you really want to triple down on that. On top of that as well, they are the most durable way of then enacting your army rule. I think there is an argument potentially to take out a land fortress and maybe take a few Sagittars, or like Matt's done where he's gone with a double Capricus carrier. But I feel that the list has enough mission playing aspects in the form of, if 3 Thunderkin need to go do something, it can. If 5 Berserkers need to do something, they can. Even Buri Angrisson can, do something for us as well in that regard. If we really, 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 really needed to, we could have Ufar on his own, just sitting behind a building doing things, and that frees up warriors to maybe go do a mission playing aspect for us as well. So I feel like we've got enough options here to allow us to play the mission, but also getting all those efficiencies. We've got multiple choices for Bastion running, like the idea of your opponent setting up and you having 3 land fortresses all behind terrain, and your opponent basically having to play, like, guess which one's going to move through the building like this turn. Yeah, and that's something that really will double down on those sort of that sort of off-table psychological thing that your opponent's going to have to deal with in that regard. But also then we have multiple instances of Vengeance Flare to be able to be popped. So again, that brings that mind game in there that our opponent's going to be looking at. We've got loads of ways to be able to proc that detachment rule. We've got lots of transport capacity as well. So we've got a lot of ways to be able to use that secure positions as well, especially on those big models, because where we have 2 units in those transports for secure positions, that then our opponent's then going to have to think, okay, well, it's one or the other's going to come out. Which one is he going to do this time, type of thing, which just creates all those levels as well. Now, one thing I will mention before, obviously, we hand it back over is that Buri Angrisson is obviously a point of contention. I'm not too sure if he stays in the list. If you at home wanted to try this list but you weren't a big fan of him, one of the biggest recommendations I could give you is either another unit of 5 Berserkers, or something which I think is a lot better is another unit of 10 Warriors. And what that would actually allow you to do is have a unit where you can really just dump 20 AC on an objective with no warning. Now, the only reason I wouldn't like it as much is purely from the fact of then it sort of messes up the transports a bit, depending on how you want to do it. But I do, because then it really forces the Thunderkin with beams into Strat Reserve, whereas there may be games where you actually want to have the choice on whether they're going to go in reserve or not. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you need to sort of really factor in with this sort of detachment and list and such. And I do think that there's a load of things you can do with it. This is just my example as well, and yeah, I like it, and I'm looking forward to. I'm gonna give it a go on this coming Friday for a game I've got planned versus Chaos Knight. So hopefully that will I can tell Matt the results, and he can put it in the thing. So,
Yeah, I think it looks great. I actually like your list quite a bit. I was going back and forth on a triple land for it, so I might have to try your list out as well, Jake. You got me a little bit excited to test this one out with the double warriors. So that covers both lists, one from myself, one from Jake. Two completely different, well, solid cores, I'd say, but two very different inclusions for like auxiliary units and playstyle, things like that. So as you can see, a super flexible detachment. All right, everybody, that wraps up our deep dive video on the BRANDFAST detachment with our very honorable and special guest here, Jake himself. If you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment for me down below. And you can also check Jake out and his Votann, and of course the incredible team that he works with over at Vanguard Tactics, who have been an incredible inspiration to the channel and to many, many other hobbyists and gamers out there as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, my name's Jake. I'm from a channel called Vanguard Tactics. So basically, we do like weekly battle reports, live streams every Wednesday, 7 p.m. in the UK. So I'm not going to sit here and go through all the time zones because I really don't know. But again, we try and do our sort of whole goal is to be sort of represent the game, whether that be no matter how you want to play it, whether that be casually, competitively, all that, represent it with a good mindset and a good way as well. So for us, it's all about education. Like we provide a bunch of courses, all from everything from the bottom of the rung of you've never even played a war game before, you don't even know what it is. We teach you everything about that, all the way up to what we call our intermediate levels, where we do how to play courses for every single faction. I have one for Votann as well, that is on there, which you can check that out via obviously the Vanguard Tactics YouTube channel. And then on top of that, we have another thing called the Vanguard Tactics Academy, which is all about just teaching people general skills, and a lot of the philosophies and such I've spoken about today, we sort of represent on there as well. And we really are sort of people of, we try our best to just sort of give people the best representation of this fantastic hobby and community as possible. And we do, we always strive for always excellence, but also to be better. Always, you can always improve in any way. So any feedback that anybody would love to give, I will happily hear it with open ears, and encourage people to do so as well.
Absolutely. Well said. I think it's a great resource to tap into if you guys can. Go check them out. I personally tune into the live streams whenever I can, and you may have caught some of my comments inside of the live streams towards Jake as well. So highly endorse checking them out if you're looking for more Votann content or just general Warhammer content as well. With that said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts or comments, let me know down in the description below. And like always, I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks.